The 2023 draft is in the books, and the Steelers did pretty well. Alongside Chris Halleck, my name is Corey Chris, and good evening from the UPMC Rooney Sports Complex here on the South Side. Like I said, Chris, when we look back on this draft, at least a week from now, obviously, Mike Tomlin said it best. This has to play out over the course of years by this point. But on paper, Chris, the Steelers did pretty well in this draft.
Yeah, on paper is the key word there. But yeah, that's all we can go off of right now. Day 3 of the draft, you're just kind of wondering how can the Steelers possibly follow up getting, the value that they got. Nobody thought Joey Porter Jr. was going to fall at 32. Nobody thought Darnell Washington was going to fall all the way to 93rd overall. And then first pick of day 3, they, pick 132nd overall, and Nick Herbig is still there, edge rusher that was projected to go in the 3rd round, maybe even as early as a late 2nd, and he's still there in the 4th, and the Steelers grab him. It's just, I think that's kind of been the theme of the draft, is that there were just players that fell for whatever reason. Obviously medical, there's always that concern, but at the same time, when those players fall, and if the Steelers trust the process that they went through in terms of medicals, and those players just fall into their lap. I mean, Omar even said it when he was talking about Darnell Washington. He was like, I can't believe he was still there. So I think that's kind of been the theme of the draft. The Steelers took advantage of what they knew about those players. And even though some other teams might have been hesitant, and even if the Steelers were hesitant at certain points in the draft, they took advantage. They grabbed those players, and they got – the upside for this draft is massive for sure.
So over the next 15 minutes, Chris and I will be here to answer questions. We're live on YouTube. We're live on Facebook. We're live on Twitter.
Shoot us questions.
Live questions, live feed. We can see them all in real time. We'll be here for the next 15 minutes or so, just talking about really what Omar Khan and Mike Tomlin and company were able to do. And Chris, looking at day 3, obviously, no 5th or 6th round pick. And the temptation obviously would be there, you would think, for Omar Khan to move back into the 5th or the 6th if there was a player that they especially liked. But with 2 7th round picks, the Steelers held pat. You talked about Nick Herbig. Let's go over to the 7th round real quick. And Corey Trice is a really interesting name out of Purdue, because he had a lot of projections, mocks, if you will, grades that were much higher, perhaps even in day 2. And then you look at Spencer Anderson. Number 1, the Mike Tomlin pipeline to Maryland is pretty obvious at this point. And also, it's a very versatile offensive lineman. He played tackle, he played guard, he played center, both sides, every side. So a couple of nice value additions for the Steelers on day 3. And really, once you get to the 7th round, you're looking for upside, you're looking for potential, and that's what you want to see.
Yeah, you definitely get that from Corey Trice. I mean, he joins a similar skill. He has a similar skill set to Joey Porter Jr. Has really good size, really good length, very physical in press coverage, and so the Steelers possibly get another really good press guy in Corey Trice. But there is some concern when it comes to injuries. He had a broken ankle in high school. He had a high ankle sprain at one point. He had a torn ACL in 2021. There is injury concern there, injury history at such a young age. And so, teams will be hesitant at that point. And so didn't see him falling all the way to like near the end of the 7th round, but that stuff can happen in a draft. And we saw it with Voorhees. The Ravens took Voorhees, the guard from USC, late because of the knee injury he has. He won't be playing football this year, so it happens. But yes, when you're drafting that late, you're drafting for upside. And to Eric's point, watching the draft this year was like, how would Baltimore get all the guys that would fall, and fans would rant and rave about it. And then this weekend it was the Steelers. And I think, like I said, I want to emphasize again Eric's point. This was a draft in which the Steelers took advantage of certain players falling. And listen, there was concern, like last year, there was concern over George Pickens and his knee. And we saw how that play out. We saw George Pickens come in, almost no concerns about his knee whatsoever throughout his rookie year. So the Steelers have a process that they go through. If they trust their process for where they're going to take a certain guy, if Darnell Washington is there at 93 and they're comfortable taking him with the medical history, they're going to do it. Same thing with Corey Trice in the 7th round. So again, the upside for this draft because of where they got certain guys is huge.
And of course, looking at Darnell Washington, that was probably the biggest name when it comes to medicals, when it comes to potential, when it comes to his health and everything.
And he said it was like like some cartilage flare up in his knee. It's not like he had like an ACL injury or something like that, so. Sorry, go ahead.
No, it's fine.
I wanted to throw that in there.
No, but Mike, I asked Mike Tomlin after the draft ended. Of course, Tomlin and Khan spoke here on the South Side, and what Tomlin said about Washington. Because remember on Thursday what Tomlin said about Broderick Jones, right? Last year, he's in Athens, he's scouting players. Probably George Pickens. And he's asking players if there's one name that we're going to be back here for, who's it going to be? And everybody brought up Broderick Jones. And I asked Tomlin, was there a same sentiment to Washington? And the fascinating thing about Washington is not only was he not really the pass catching tight end because of Brock Bowers, of course, who's probably the top tight end looking at next year's draft, but also because Washington's skill set is just different. And then when you watch his tape and his stats are not one and the same.
Right.
The thing about Washington, and we talked about it last night on 24/7 as well, is that he is going to be Najee Harris's best friend in open space as a run blocker. And look, schematically, right, Nick Herbig, schematically as an edge rusher, outside linebacker, where can you pair him up? Can you pair him up with Watt and Alex Highsmith, of course? And then Spencer Anderson with versatility, guard, center, tackle, basically wherever you need him should they stick around. Of course, the seventh rounders, it's always tough to tell this early, but you got to like position versatility. You have to like value. You have to like just the traits that Mike Tomlin and Omar Khan chased in this draft. And what that is physical, versatile, and can play multiple positions.
I really want to harp on the physical part of it, because when you look at up and down the board from Broderick Jones to Joey Porter Jr. To Keanu Benton, Darnell Washington, even Nick Herbig, even though he's undersized, like all of these guys, Corey Trice, like all of these guys, physical, like their physicality is a big, big part of their game. Broderick Jones is a mauler. Joey Porter Jr., physical press corner. Keanu Benton, violent. I've heard the term violent a lot when it comes to Keanu Benton in the middle. There are, that trait is there. And I think Mike Tomlin didn't want some of the players that they drafted to use the word goon necessarily. Mike Tomlin kind of joked about that in his press conference just now.
Yeah.
But it's that style of play. The Steelers want to smack you in the mouth. That's like old school Steelers football. If you're an old school Steelers fan, this draft should get you very, very excited, because all of these guys bring physicality. Yes, they have the other talents and other characteristics that will help in terms of like skill, whether it's cornerback, tight end, whatever, but physicality is a big, big part of it.
Go to Justin here on YouTube. And yes, Chandon Sullivan, a name that we did want to bring up throughout all of this. The Steelers signed Chandon Sullivan away from the Vikings. And for the lack of a better phrase here, this is your slot corner. This is the guy that's going to line up. This is the guy that's going to line up probably opposite Arthur Maulet, or at least compete with Arthur Maulet for snaps on the interior. Now, obviously, with Akello Witherspoon and Patrick Peterson, they draft Trice, they draft Porter, they bring in Sullivan. That
they
cornerback,
Levi Wallace there.
Levi Wallace too. That cornerback position is rock solid now after this day 3 of the draft.
I don't know if I want to go as far as rock solid. I want to see them all play.
Sure.
First,
fair.
I want to go through OTA, not just even OTAs. I want to go through minicamp, and especially once they're on the fields in Latrobe, that's when you kind of get a better sense of it. But on paper, it does look better. The cornerback position does look better than it did last year on paper, because you can kind of swap the Cam Sutton for Patrick Peterson. And yes, like when we're talking about slot corner, Chandon Sullivan does bring another name to that along with Arthur Maulet. But we do have to remember that Patrick Peterson will be moving around. Everybody thinks of him as an outside corner. He will be moving around for sure. Like that has been talked about very publicly. Doesn't necessarily mean he's going to be Cam Sutton, who can just go bounce back and forth, almost seamlessly. But Patrick Peterson will be moving around for sure.
We're going back to Eric here, and he talks about the physical nature of the cornerbacks. And again, it was talked about by Mike Tomlin, the physicality. It was talked about by Omar Khan, the physicality and the traits of the players that were picked in the draft. And then when you add Sullivan in there and his ability to play as a press slot corner, there is the ability, and that combined with TJ Watt getting to the quarterback, Alex Highsmith, you had Nick Herbig in there. I keep wanting to say Nate. I'm not going to do it.
We're
not going to
have a problem with that at all this year. At all.
Not one bit.
Nate, I said Nick just now.
See, you combine the two.
And Nick Herbig. It's not going to be a problem
whatsoever. We're going to fuse the two in there. But look, when you combine the physical nature of the cornerbacks and you combine that with the speed and the power of the pass rush,
Yeah.
this is going to become a more problematic defense for teams to have to deal with.
Yeah, the one thing I really am curious about, and to Justin's point, you have the two big physical corners. I mean, that is something. And throughout the process, I heard that like game speed and being able to run with receivers was a really, really coveted trait for them. And it's not like these big physical corners can't run. It's not that they can't move. They're just not Deonte Banks. They're not, DJ Turner. They're not these burner guys who can just run with the Tyreek Hill and try to actually beat him in a foot race. But there are other ways to stay with receivers. And one of the best ways you can is to stop them or at least disrupt their rhythm right off the line of scrimmage. And that's something that both Joey Porter Jr., especially Joey Porter Jr., but Corey Trice can do as well.
Jay Miles jumping in here from YouTube. Thoughts on Spencer Anderson. And here's the two things that stick out to me. Number one, we talked about the versatility
was a big thing
and the ability to play different positions. But just from digging a little bit, and obviously I still have more to write on our seventh rounders.
Transparency. He's going to be the one we know the least about. He was not a big guy coming into the draft.
But just based on a little bit of research, it's single-digit sack numbers he allowed in more than 1,000 pass blocking snaps in 3 years at Maryland. And that's a tough conference to have to block. When you got Ohio State, Michigan, you got Penn State running at you. So a tough conference to play in, and he performed pretty well in it. President Nitty here, surprises to not see a late wide receiver, third QB. Draft was an A+. So let's keep in mind the undrafted free agency is now open. And, reports are coming out, nothing official from the Steelers.
Can't remember his name, but the quarterback from Minnesota.
Tanner Morgan.
He's from – it's been reported that he's signed with the Steelers. Obviously, the Steelers still will be going through the undrafted free agency process, but that is another way that they can add to the quarterback room. Apparently, they already have. They could have gone either way. Obviously, the cheapest route to go is to go undrafted free agent. And, for whatever reason that doesn't work out, there will be options in training camp. Whether it's in Latrobe or coming from elsewhere, there will be options.
Unless there is a player that, number one, if the position is especially of need, and number two, if there is a guy that this organization would have been so high on, and I know it's so easy to look at last year in Brock Purdy, right? What happened with San Francisco, but that's a dime, that's a dime out of 100 case. That's just a 1 in 100 case. It's just not going to happen anytime soon. And Paul here mentions we have another wide receiver.
I like put that up there just to let people know, like, yes, the Steelers do have enough depth at wide receiver, and they did tick off a lot of boxes. But if they did take a wide receiver, it wasn't going to be the worst thing in the world. You can't, especially in today's NFL, and when you look at the AFC and what you have to compete with, you can't have enough firepower. You just can't. Yes, there's only one football to go around, but you can't have enough firepower. You need to be able to add. If for whatever reason the Steelers traded up to 14 and they got Jackson Smith and Jigba, I wouldn't have had any problem with that. That selection. Obviously, going with Broderick Jones, solidifying left tackle, that was a good way to go. But adding another wide receiver, that would have been just fine too. But I think that goes to show, because the Steelers do typically rely on it's almost a foregone conclusion they take a receiver in the draft,
right?
And they didn't.
Right.
They focused on the trenches. They focused on physicality. Both left tackle, defensive tackle, tight end. Who's pretty much a sixth
physical cornerback,
sixth lineman. So
they did not draft any of a quarterback, a running back, or wide receiver.
Yeah.
The only skill position on offense the Steelers looked at was tight end, and that tight end he literally calls himself the sixth offensive lineman. So, hey, he hit the like button, President Eddie. He hit the like button for you. But, here's, again, what I like about the draft, number one, is the value of the picks that the Steelers got. They didn't stick at 80 to get Washington when they could have. Herbig, of course, they had to go back into the fourth round, and they end up getting him. And also, the thing I love about it is Tomlin and Khan were not forced, and I think that's the key word here. They didn't feel forced to have to go back into the sixth or the fifth. They didn't feel forced to stay at 80. They didn't feel forced to trade out of 32. I feel like, and this is Omar Khan, of course, his first draft as the Steelers GM. I feel like Khan was in total control of what he needed to control in this draft, and that is not overextending, not going back too far. I think he stayed pretty even keel with where he needed to be.
This comment from using Brit, I think is what. So are you listening, Najee? I don't think Najee is the one we need to be holding accountable right now. And the reason why I say that is because when you look at everything that the Steelers have on offense now, they have Najee Harris and Jalen Warren, a really good number, 1-2 punch out of the backfield. They've got Kenny Pickett going into a second year. They completely rebuilt the interior of the line. They solidified left tackle with Broderick Jones. They added to the tight end room. They added to the receiver room with Allen Robinson. You're getting Calvin Austin. Let's see what he's made of if the foot's good. The person we need to be holding accountable now that the offense has all of these weapons is Matt Canada.
Mm-hmm.
The Steelers had enough confidence in him to, the offense got better over the second half of the season. Did it get to the point where they're good enough to compete for a Super Bowl? Absolutely not. It did get better, so that it was enough, for the Steelers to be like, you're under contract for one more year. Let's do it again.
Mm-hmm.
Now, there's no excuses for Matt Canada. This offense has to produce. Doesn't have to be top 5 in the NFL, but it needs to be able to be, to put that point home, you have to be able to have firepower. You have to be able to score points in today's NFL. Yes, you have to have a good defense, and the Steelers should have a good defense, but they have to be able to score points.
I bring up Autumn here. First off, thank you for the $4.99. It's second.
Thank you.
Feels confident about this year's group. And I want to kind of segue Autumn's comment into talking about draft grades. Now, I'm not draft grade guy. I'm not mock draft guy. I'm not draft grade guy either.
You're the mock draft guy. I can take on that
role.
Well,
so Mike Tomlin said it best, right? It's going to take a few years for us to really know what the grade of this draft is. But here's what I can say. As far as tone, as far as how I feel about what the Steelers did and how they did, and I'm pretty sure I share the same sentiment with you and the rest of those listening, I feel good. Really good about this draft class in particular, because again, of the profile of the prospects and the value they got for a lot of these guys.
There wasn't, even in some drafts where you felt pretty good, there wasn't a lot of. There's always been those drafts where it's been like, you know what, I kind of like that player, but I feel like he could have been available, maybe not a round later, but probably if they were to trade down 10 spots, he probably still would have been there. I don't think the Steelers really had to do that in this draft whatsoever. I feel like every single pick that they made, it was the appropriate spot for them to take that player, especially whenever Joey Porter Jr. is still there at 32, whenever Darnell Washington is still there at 93, when Corey Trice is still there at 241st. I mean, like, those are players that probably should have been gone. They're like, again, those players aren't just sitting there that late for no reason. There is risk when it comes to those players. I really don't want to feel like, the Steelers just completely ripped off the entire NFL.
I don't want to say that either.
There is risk with those players. How much is yet to be determined, but there is risk there. But for where they got those players, they are really, really good for where they were selected.
Well, and here's the thing about 7th rounders. There's a reason why they're 7th rounders. It's because they're not 1st or 2nd rounders. And what I mean by that is they are missing something. If you have a checklist, if you will, of a cornerback, which, Brian mentioned, and we just, took him off the board here, and Paul here makes a really good point. He'll still be their next pick. Okay.
Oh my gosh.
Is there a thought for that? This was prime positioning for a lot of what the Steelers did. But real quick on Trice here, as an example, the reason why he's a 7th round corner is because he's missing traits that make a 1st or 2nd round corner a 1st or 2nd round corner. Now, risk, like Chris talked about, is they risk a 7th round pick on him, which it could be something, it could be nothing. So there you go. A couple more minutes here before we get out of here.
Yeah, but at the end of the day, it is a 7th round pick. It's not. I mean, Mark Robinson was a 7th round pick. If Mark Robinson doesn't turn into a starter, I don't think anybody's going to really rip the Steelers for that. If Corey Trice doesn't turn into a starter for the Steelers, I don't think anybody's going to rip the team for that, nor should they. It's a 7th round pick. But for where, again, to drive home the whole point of value, with where they got him, it's not like they traded up, that they packaged one of their 7th rounders or both of their 7th rounders to move up to the 5th round and take them, even though it still probably would have been looked at as a good value pick even in the 5th round. They didn't have to. They didn't have to do any of those things. The only player that they were aggressive to get was Broderick Jones, which they knew he wasn't going to be there at 17.
And that's a franchise left tackle.
Yes. I mean, absolutely has the potential to be a franchise left tackle that can protect your franchise quarterback for a decade.
let's go to Kawhi Leonard 1. If it's the real Kawhi Leonard, welcome aboard. We need top 1 defense. Let's make Kawhi Leonard 1 our last one here, and then we have to sign out here. So
yeah, I mean, listen, the Steelers got the one thing that the Steelers did really, really well last year that they needed to do last year. They got a lot better against the run. They were dead last in 2021, and they moved all the way to and finished 9th against the run in 2022. They did that with 7 games without T.J. Watt, and we talk about what T.J. Watt can do, rushing the quarterback, but he also sets the edge in the running in run defense if he's healthy all year. And the thing is that because they did draft Nick Herbig,
nice job.
Because they drafted him. They do have that third edge rusher who's young, who's talented, who's going to be motivated to carve out a role for himself. And TJ likes to tag out a lot. He's going to have an opportunity, and they will be able to have that rotation. What they did up front, adding who's the nose tackle from the Chargers that they signed in free agency? Fehoko.
They did Fehoko, yep.
So they signed him. They drafted Keanu Benton. They got more guys up front. So that shouldn't slide. And then they also solidified the cornerback position. They solidified safety with a couple of signings. They brought back Casey.
Keanu Neal.
Keanu Neal was the other free agent signing. They solidified just about every single spot. Inside linebacker still might be the weakest spot, and on paper, it's better than it was last year.
Mm-hmm.
So the defense should be better than it was last year, and the defense was not the reason why the Steelers finished 9-8 last year.
Mm-hmm.
So let's just put that. So the defense should be better. Now, again, could be recency bias. It's where the draft's barely done. We still have OTAs to go through, minicamp to go through, but there's a lot to like after this. I don't want to try to get Steelers fans too hyped up, but there's a lot to like with what Omar Khan and Mike Tomlin did.
I'll give my final thought before we get out of here. And please remember to subscribe to us here at DK Pittsburgh Sports. It's $1 a month on the website. I mean, $1 a month for the next 4 months. I mean, you can think of a lot of things you could do with that $1. And this is probably the best thing you could do with it. Not just saying that because we write for the site, but also because it really is true. I mean, you're not getting that value anywhere else. And as a reminder, please follow us on Twitter as well. He's at Chris Halleck. I'm at CD Chris. And my final thought before we get out of here is let's see the next steps now. Yeah. I think what Mike Tomlin and Omar Khan did is just continue this snowball, a good snowball, I should add, of this offseason. They hit free agency hard and came out on the other side of it in a positive note. Mm-hmm. They hit the draft hard. They played it, I think, correctly, and they found a lot of really good pieces that are going to help this team not only next year, but for quite a few years to come. You would think Jones is one of those franchise left tackles. You would think Joey Porter Jr. has staying power. You would think Keanu Benton is a fit. You think Darnell Washington's a fit. And then on your day 3s, you wait to see what happens. You develop them. That's what day 3 prospects are. They're development prospects. Yeah. So we'll see what the continuation is after that. And right now, like I said, I think you have to feel pretty good about where the Steelers sit. So we are signing off here because we have to go write. We have stories to publish to the website, to the mothership. He is Chris Halleck. I am Corey Christen. This is, as you can see, the UPMC Rudy Sports Complex, a very dark one behind us. We have phones lighting us.
They're closed up. They closed up shop.
Yeah,
the draft's over.
After hours in the UPMC Rudy Sports Complex. We'll be, of course, on the site for rookie minicamp in a couple of weeks. So
probably it's not official yet, but it'll either be next weekend or the weekend after.
Yeah, no official word. Yeah, no official word on when quite yet, but we will be here whenever that takes place. And of course, more Steelers 24/7s and more discussion on DKPittsburghSports.com and more discussions on Twitter, wherever you guys want to find us. We're always hanging out. So, again, he's Chris Halleck. I'm Corey Christen. This has been Steelers 24/7 on DK Pittsburgh Sports. We'll talk to you all soon.